Okay, so welcome back to this Drupal 10 and probably Drupal 11 series, just around building a site, setting up a site, hosting and so forth. So the first video after the introduction is just to set up the code base. And the project that we are rebuilding is this project here. This isn't really used anywhere. It came about because I was at one point setting up a project to have multiple headless consumers of the same Drupal site, and I really wanted to explore GraphQL and a few other things, and this is the progress that I made. So there's a fair bit that I want to capture from this site, but it's not necessarily it's intentionally set up to be separate from client work, and as you can see, examples for you to plagiarize. So we're going to start with this code base. What I've done is I've got the code base cloned twice locally, and we want to have access to the old one, easy access to the old one. So we're going to have that open in VS Code, and then we're going to work off the new one. So what I'll do first is I'll just come in here and and just put that in a list form, and we're just going to delete everything in here. Again, this is not what you'd probably normally do when you're doing a rebuild. You would just change what you wanted to change. I'm just using the same repository because, hey, whatever. So let's delete. Okay, and we're left with the Git repository folder. So if I head over to my terminal, let's open the code base. Oops, wrong command. In VS Code. So we have our folder where we're working on our site, and we also have the folder where the old branch is, the old version is. All right, so firstly what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my git ignore file. Pretty much, I don't want the first thing that I do be to accidentally commit the vendor folder of my new project. So I've just got this one. If you look around, you'll see that there's other examples of .git ignores for Drupal. This just happens to be one that's got a few things that I've added over time, and I separated some things out the way I like them to be set up. So there's not really much to say about that. Except you'll find that there are a lot of things that are coming the default Drupal site build that I don't really care to have in my repository. So that's definitely something that's very different. Okay, so I've got my git ignore. Let's paste that in, and let's commit that. I'm about to do my first git commit, so let's just quickly look at what I'm using from in my git shortcuts. So if I just look at my git config, I've got a few things going on here just so you can be aware of that. I'm using a lot of these aliases. So if I do BR, that's branch. If I do CI, that's commit. They are muscle memory for me, so I will do a lot of this stuff quite automatically. I've got an alternative log format set up, so when I type git lg, it's going to give me this pretty format. I don't use a git UI tool. I'm using Nano for saving my commit messages, and not really much else to say about that. So git add everything. Whoops. Okay, so we've deleted everything. I'm going to put all this in one thing, but I'm basically so let's clear all the files out and add a git ignore back. Okay, so if I do a git log now, you can kind of see the log format that I'm using. So if I run composer init, it'll take me through some of the questions. So this is how we'll find out what we get out of the box just with composer. So I'm just keeping this very minimal. I know this is a project, it's worth adding this, it's informative. Would I like to define my dependencies? No. Would I like to define my dependencies? No. Auto mapping? No. And that's going to be my initial composer.json. Yes. So that's now a project. If I run composer up, okay, there's not really anything to do here. I see it's created a composer lock file. I've got I've got my ignore, I've got my composer lock file. It's created a vendor directory with an auto load, and this should stay outside of my git ignore. And it's created the lock file. And you see there's very little in the lock file. There's just some configuration. Let's commit that. So now we have our basic composer project and we want to start adding some Drupal to it. And I want to reiterate that this is not really how you'd normally set up a project. It's so that we can step through each piece and just understand it as we go. So I'm looking at two places here for, I guess, best practice. One place is what Drupal.org recommends in terms of setting up a new project. And so this is the composer.json that is used for that. And then another one is this Drupal project has had composer support for longer than anyone else. And this is a really, really great resource, and it was very instrumental in the early innovation in this space. So I'm interested in just comparing notes with between these two composer.jsons. So in core, for example, you can see it just wants composer installers, working out where packages should go, the scaffolding, which we'll talk about soon, and core recommended. And it also adds this core project message, which is responsible for printing this message. Now, I don't really want this. I mean, I could use this for other purposes, but I don't want this particularly in my project at this stage. So it's just an example of where something is opinionated upstream and I'm not interested in inheriting that functionality. And then if we compare that with this, it's probably a good idea for us to set a minimum PHP version. It provides consistency everywhere. Composer installers, composer patches is not mentioned in the core configuration. And composer patches is something that you'll always want. You'll always want that to make changes to your Drupal site without having to hack code. And we've got the scaffold. We've got core recommended is slightly different, so we want 10.1. It's also got Drush. We definitely want Drush. We won't add it yet, but we definitely want Drush. And it's got a couple other things such as setting your configuration, you're using .env files. A couple other things we want to grab will be this legacy conflict with Drupal, which is the vanilla Drupal core. We'll grab this require dev. We notice that's consistent between the two files, so we definitely want that stuff. And we're just going to add a couple other things such as this sort packages config, minimum stability, and a little bit of scaffolding stuff just to get us started. So let's go ahead and add this. So I'll start by just copying this out of core. And it's decided to go to require dev. So I want to grab all of this. We'll grab this little bit of config. So we've got our web root. I'm going to take this out for the moment. Actually, installing this will ask us to add these back in, so we can take that out for the moment. And then I'll grab these packages from. So what do I want? I actually would love to get composer patches. It's just a no-brainer. I'm removing that messages package, and I might leave. I'll add the PHP requirement in as well. Certainly, if someone doesn't want to, install, have that PHP requirement for whatever reason, they can always tell Composer to install without that PHP requirement. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just commit this. 10.1. Okay, I'm gonna make that 2.1. Not a big deal. It would always get the best package for us anyway. Okay, so now let's run our Composer install and see what we get from that. Sorry, I should say Composer update. So that's great. It's added a whole bunch of packages, and now it's asking us about do we trust these plugins. So this is the bit that we didn't copy across, and we're saying yes to all these. So that just means that it'll just add what it needs to add for what we've added. So if we look at our Composer, Composer.ison, so Composer's actually added that section for us now. Okay, so now we have what we've got here. We've got so we have the vendor, we have the vendor directory, we have the web directory. I've got a problem here, and that core seems to be not in the right place. So I'll review that in a second. The scaffolding has added modules, profiles, sites. It's added a whole bunch of files, a whole bunch of test files, which I won't want to keep, but I'll review that later. And then a whole bunch of scaffolding files in the base. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete all of this and just commit the Composer lock file as a progress. So the great thing is Composer install, running Composer install would re-add these files. I noticed that looks like the scaffolding's added something to my Git ignore. I'm not micromanaging my Git ignore too much. I'm not too concerned about that. Next, we want to get Drupal core to be installed in the right place. So we'll add this install paths config. That config relates to this Composer installers package. So we're going to grab. We're just comparing this one in the core Drupal Composer project is smaller than the Drupal core one. It's interesting that Drupal core specifies where Drush packages should be installed. However, it does not actually install Drush, whatever. So we're going to grab the install paths. And this goes into our extra settings. Yep, I like that sort of flat formatting. Okay. I think that's about. I'm just oh yeah. Then there's and then there's also these patch configuration stuff. So we go Drupal scaffold, install the paths, and let's just grab these settings as well. Exit on failure, patch levels, and so forth. Just making things work. There's also this empty patches object, so that will that's where our any patches that we want will live, and we don't have any to start with. Just out of interest, in the previous version of this Drupal, this project that we're rebuilding has got no patches. So yeah, try it fairly vanilla. Okay, save that. And then, so I'm going to run composer install and commit the resulting files. Or composer update since I've changed my composer.ison. Okay, so if we do a git status now, what we see is that there's an untracked folder now called web, and there's just the changes to our composer files. And if we look in our code, we see the vendor directory, so that's being ignored. That's what we want. And we'll also notice that the editor config git attributes is being ignored, and that's being ignored by the ignore file. So we'll review that. So when I do git, and I want to see what gets added from the web folder, and I can see that these git ignore files are being added, and that's fine by me. And I'll just have a little bit of a look at what's in those files. Okay, so it's just ignoring those readmes. Yeah, sure. So commit. Okay. So I've just noticed that something in the installation in the installation. So the core scaffolding has added this git attributes to my local git ignore. I'm just going to put it here with this other scaffolding file, and that's fine by me. So I just next want to show you. We were looking at when we installed we're looking at when it installed, it's copied all of these files over as part of the scaffolding process. So I just want to look at this more closely, because we want to use the core scaffolding for our own project. So we'll be looking at it in more detail later. So if I jump over and have a look at core scaffolding, so this is the configuration that Drupal core uses to set up the scaffolding, and so this is all the defaults. And in my situation, especially in the case of these sites settings, because I've got my own way of setting these up, and a lot of these files just simply contain a lot of documentation, I definitely don't want these files in. So I'm just going to so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to eliminate any files that I don't want. So I've got this example here. This example here has all of those files all set so that none of those will copy in. So if I jump into my my composer file, and I just remember exactly where this should go, it's going to go in here in Drupal scaffold. And let's just talk through what each of these files are, which files maybe we want to keep. Okay, so editor config, I do want to keep this because it should in theory have some really good core defaults, but it is only for local, so I don't commit it to the repository, so I don't want to override that file. Likewise with git attributes, I don't want to override this file. It's potentially got a lot of important information. For now, I'm not going to, so linting, for now I'm going to exclude any of these linting files. So we'll put it this way, I'll make a decision later about how I want to handle that. I want to exclude these CSLints. I want to exclude these hosting files. I want to exclude this example git ignore. I don't want to override index. I need index.php for the site to run. Install.txt, I don't want to commit that or have that. This robots.txt, I do want to have this at the moment, noting that later there is a module that would take control of that, but by default I want a vanilla, decent vanilla robots.txt. I don't want an update PHP file sitting in my web. Yeah, it's actually an IIS file, so I don't want that file. I don't want any readmes. I don't want any default services. They all contain a lot of documentation. I don't want any examples, none of this stuff, and I don't want these readmes. So now it is micromanaging this, and different developers will micromanage different things. I micromanage this. One of the weird things about it is sometimes Drupal will add a file, and I don't really have a way of picking that up, that I don't want that in my code base, but whatever. It's fine for now because it serves as a good example of a way to approach this if you want, especially if you are like me and you really don't want these files polluting your setup in your site's configuration. Okay, I'm going to save these files as they are and update my composer. Okay, if we do git status, we should see just changes to the git ignore in the composer file. We do have now you notice that all these files that I didn't want to go in are still in here, so I'm going to remove the web directory and reinstall. Okay, and let's have a look at web now. So now we have a nice clean web directory, and if we do web, we don't even have a site's default directory at the moment because we didn't tell anything to get scaffolded into it. So that's our basic installation, our basic setup of our composer files. So we understand everything that's in here now. It's installing a composer project. Nothing's going to work. There's no settings, there's no modules and so forth, there's just core, but we have the basic structure. In the next video I'll talk about setting up your settings files.